In the 1870s, the land around the little town of Kimberley, in what is now South Africa, was found to contain the richest deposits of diamonds in the world. Europeans in search of quick and easy profits rushed into the area. Among them was a young Englishman who'd come to South Africa at the age of 17. His name was Cecil Rhodes. In spite of his youth, Rhodes quickly learned that the path to great personal wealth led through great personal power. He set out to win that power by getting control of the diamond industry. He succeeded by clever manoeuvring, the steady purchase of other men's claims when their funds were low, and the necessary ruthlessness. Rhodes saw to it that he was going to be the one to emerge as the king of diamonds. And his kingdom was going to be in Africa, where the English reigned supreme. This is what he wrote.
Just fancy those parts of the world that are at present inhabited by the most despicable specimens of human beings. What an alteration there would be if they were brought under Anglo-Saxon influence.
This early film, taken in Kimberley, shows that attitude of arrogance at work. Yet mineral wealth was not the only prize. There was territory to be won. All through the 19th century, British forces pushed out of Cape Colony, overcoming one African people after another, until in 1879 they came up against the most formidable of all, the Zulu. So far, this mission of the gun had gone well for the British. But the Zulu had 25,000 warriors ready to take up arms. Their king, Cetshwayo, wanted peace. After all, he'd been crowned with British approval. But the British wanted war. This genteel set of lecture slides, the Victorian equivalent of news film from the battlefront, reported the war as the public at home wished to imagine it. This was the heyday of empire, and here were British redcoats subduing one more mob of heathen savages before bestowing on them the blessings of Anglo-Saxon civilization. The reality was very different. At Isandhlwana, Britain suffered one of the worst defeats in her imperial history, and the Zulus had a victory to celebrate. As the troops strove vainly to get the lids off their ammunition boxes, the Zulu impis overwhelmed them. At the end of the day, 800 British soldiers lay dead. Not a single wounded man was spared. But at Rorke's Drift, a few miles away, a tiny British garrison with great bravery withstood 3 Zulu regiments numbering nearly 5,000 men. Modern firepower took its devastating toll. Determined to break Zulu power once and for all, another British invasion force, equipped with field artillery and the new rapid-firing Gatling guns, advanced on the king's capital at Ulundi. Here they found the Zulu army, but what followed was a massacre rather than a battle. Some 1,500 Zulu warriors died in fruitless charges on the guns. British casualties were put at 12. It was the end of the independent Zulu nation. A billionaire by this time, Rhodes now unfolded his plan for British rule from Cairo to Cape Town. His immediate ambition was fixed on the upland country to the north of the Limpopo River. Here in this broad plateau, with its pleasant climate, there was abundant land for cattle, and beneath it the promise of still more mineral wealth, especially gold. He faced one great obstacle. 60 years earlier, a branch of the Zulu known as the Matabele had broken away, trekked north, and built a strong military kingdom in the land that Rhodes now meant to seize for white settlement. The African bush has long since moved in and taken over. But this deserted spot, 100 years ago, was the living heart of Matabele power and the seat of government of its king. King Lobengula was only the second ruler of the Matabele. He was destined to be the last. True to their Zulu tradition, his men lived by the spear, raiding their neighbors, the Shona people, for cattle and women. This, they believed, was their land by right and title. But now, in a series of deceptions, Rhodes and his cronies proceeded to dispossess the Matabele of their land, their cattle, and their independence. One day, King Lobengula told a story to a white visitor to his court. He said to him, "Have you ever watched a chameleon and a fly? The chameleon gets behind the fly and gently puts one foot forward, then another. And when he's close enough, he darts his tongue, and the fly disappears. I am that fly," said Lobengula, "and you are the chameleon." On the outskirts of his royal kraal, Lobengula had allowed a few white missionaries to establish themselves. This is all that remains of a settlement run by Jesuits, whose celibate way of life had no appeal to the Matabele. But other missionaries, Protestants of various denominations, because, of course, the many schisms of the Christian faith were also imported with the missionaries, did begin to acquire some influence, but not without misunderstandings, as this old man, now well over 100, remembers.
Katina mwacheti china mamanda cheti chibaya maziso taisingazive kuti ane vaiuya chete kuuya zvavo singazive kuti vanobva kupi achibva kumba kwake uko.
Not far from the capital, across a small river, was the Anglican mission of Hope Fountain. The early missionaries were caught, almost at once, in an unavoidable dilemma. To whom was their first loyalty? To the Africans, who trusted them and whose guests they were, or to their own kith and kin? The Reverend Charles Helm, who lived in this place, made in the end a crucial choice. He was Lobengula's trusted white friend, but secretly at the same time, he began to work for Rhodes. The fact was that these missionaries soon became convinced, and no doubt rightly, and as their records show, that if they were going to convert a sizable number of Matabele, the king's power must be destroyed and Matabele culture and independence undermined. And Rhodes, they saw, was the man to do both. Step by step, Lobengula's power was eroded. He appealed to Queen Victoria. He was advised to sign treaties. Some of those who advised him to sign the treaties had come in peace and trust, but they still deceived him. The Reverend Helm lies buried here. On his tomb, his fellow missionaries felt able to inscribe the words, "Friend of the Matabele." Was he their friend? Or from within the certainties of his own belief, did he connive in their betrayal? By 1890, Rhodes and his men were ready to move. These are scenes from the feature film Rhodes of Africa, about the famous pioneer column. They show it in terms of the glorious legend it was to become for the white settlers who followed, almost a justification in itself for their right to the land they were about to seize. Lobengula had 16,000 warriors eager to attack, but fearing defeat, he held them back. The column headed north, avoiding direct contact with the Matabele and passing unopposed through the country of the less warlike Shona. Each man had been promised 15 gold prospecting claims and a 3,000-acre farm. A contemporary described them like this.
Such a mixed lot I never saw in my life. All sorts and conditions, from the aristocrat down to the street Arab. Peers and waifs of humanity mingling together like a hodgepodge.
Some of the pioneers came, in fact, from the leading families of Cape Colony. If the expedition met with defeat, Rhodes knew that their influential fathers would press the British government for military assistance. An unknown photographer captured the moment when the Union Jack was raised over Fort Salisbury, fulfilling Rhodes's dream that this earth shall be English. The moment became part of the myth. Established here for no particular reason of geography, Fort Salisbury duly became the modern city of Salisbury, now renamed Harare. Elsewhere on the continent, towns can be unmistakably African in their flavour and their style of life, but not this one. In just on 60 years, they turned it into the very model of a white man's city. And just over there is the flagstaff that commemorates the place where all that began. Amazingly enough, it's still here. So this is what it says: to the Pioneer Corps, specially recruited to become the first civil population of Mashonaland. But who were more civil? The black people who had long dwelt in Mashonaland and made it fruitful, or the white people who came here and took it from them by deceit and violence? Maybe that sounds a harsh question now, and yet the dispossession of the Shona was also harsh. They had settled the land centuries earlier, mastered and tamed it. And now, with this, they had altogether lost their birthright. Among those who had travelled up with the pioneers was Rhodes's close friend and instrument, Dr. Starr Jameson. Rhodes now chose him to administer this newly won territory. To the southwest, there still remained the undefeated Matabele. In 1892, Jameson decided that the time had come to finish with them. A pretext was easily found. Although the Shona people were now supposed to be under white protection, they were still the target of sporadic Matabele raids. A dispute over cattle quickly produced the war that Jameson needed. In traditional style, the Matabele regiments prepared to fight for their capital, Bulawayo, against Jameson's advancing troops. No amount of Matabele courage could matter now. As an English poet wrote in bitter satire, "Whatever happens, we have got the Maxim gun, and they have not." After defeat came dispossession. Nearly all of Matabele farming land and most of the 250,000 Matabele cattle were confiscated by Rhodes's British South Africa Company or by individual settlers. The structure of Matabele life was shattered. The London Missionary Society wrote to congratulate Rhodes. "As missionaries, we have little to bind our sympathies to the Matabele, neither can we pity the downfall of their power." Lobengula is said to have told his followers that rather than have a single bone of his body touched by a white man, he would disappear like a needle in the grass. And disappear he did, while some of his warriors tried vainly to find a new homeland northward across the Zambezi.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome on board our cruise, Amanzi Athunqayo, Sindebele word meaning the water that rises. My name is Phoebe, and Captain Sylvester is in command this evening. All drinks served on board are included in the toll price.
Before long, white settlers too began to push northward, over this great waterway where a generation earlier David Livingstone had wandered alone. To Rhodes would fall the unique distinction of having not one but two African colonies bearing his name.
The stretch of water we are now on is the deepest and the narrowest part of the Zambezi, and it was here where the pioneers chose to cross as from 1889. They floated their wagons, used the light balsa note, and swam their kerker. Being so close to the river, a frighteningly large amount of the settlers became ill and often died from malaria and blackwater fever.
Livingstone had died exactly 20 years earlier, and now the way was open for Christianity and commerce. Here in these lands where Livingstone had found, as he said, perfect security for life and property, but where, for Africans, there was no longer any such thing. But African resistance was not yet over. In 1896, just 3 years later, surviving Matabele regiments of about 14,000 men, some now armed with rifles, rose in furious revolt. They swept down on isolated white settlements and slaughtered more than 100 farmers. Caught unprepared, the bulk of the settlers made a defensive laager at their new capital of Bulawayo. Then the Shona people, infuriated by taxation and forced labor on white farms, rose in their turn. Led by the priests of their religion, the spirit mediums Nahanda and Kagubi, they fought a stubborn guerrilla war for many months. It was not until 1897 that both risings were finally overcome.
Na varungu chigwagwagwa nenganuni vaiva vakazoonera kuvarungu zvauya navarungu ndivo zvaidisa navarungu vanhu vanga vasina vanga nepfuti chete nemapfumo.
The settler forces had suffered considerable losses in the fighting. Their mood was not merciful. So-called rebels were hunted down and, when taken prisoner, treated as dangerous criminals. Chained together, they were brought before summary courts and not infrequently hanged from the nearest tree. Captured at last, Nehanda and Kagubi were also hanged. Such were the foundations on which Cecil Rhodes built his empire. Having thrust aside anyone who stood in his way, Rhodes spent little time in the country he had formed. This was the hut he used as an office. Close by, the colonial government's state house was built directly on the site of King Lobengula's old headquarters. At his death in Cape Town in 1902, Rhodes's body lay in state and was then taken to Bulawayo, where it was carried in procession through the streets. In the Matopo Hills, south of the city, Rhodes had a summer house built, where he liked to sit in the evening and watch the sun go down over that old Africa into whose history he had broken with such explosive force. Here the coffin was placed overnight before being carried up into the hills for burial. Thousands of Europeans had gathered at the spot called World's View. Rhodes had come here in the past and had chosen it as his final resting place. So here he lies, in the heart of the country that he conquered. But are we to see this grave as the final act of taking possession, or the ultimate insult to the people he dispossessed? Rhodes has evoked conflicting judgments. For the world of wealth, he was and is the mighty empire builder, the benevolent millionaire, the hero of money. For the world of poverty, he remains a plunderer and a pirate, the robber baron who took with both hands what did not belong to him. Rhodes and his men brought material progress, and 19th century Africa certainly needed progress. But they brought it in such a way that Africans could not share in it. They deprived Africans of that very condition, freedom, that enables mankind to move forward and develop. So the great mission of the Bible and the gun ended by completely contradicting itself, by producing an African servitude in which the visions and the dreams of men such as Livingstone were bound to be denied and set at naught.